We have thousands of different methods on how we choose leaders. I like this one that I'm about to talk about. John Wesley had 3 criteria for how he chose leaders for the early Methodist movement in the 1700s. Now, Howard Snyder in The Radical Wesley wrote this. He said, "Not only did Wesley reach the masses, he made leaders of thousands of them." And this is what John Wesley did. This is one of the brilliant things that he did inside of his movement, was he empowered people that nobody else thought should be empowered because they weren't ordained. They didn't have enough education. They didn't have enough background. They didn't have enough whatever it was. Here's a quote from Wesley. "Give me 100 preachers who fear nothing but sin and desire nothing but God, and I care not a straw, whether they be clergymen or laymen. Such alone will shake the gates of hell and set up the kingdom of heaven on earth." John Wesley. So, what were the 3 things that John Wesley chose as most important for identifying leaders for the Methodist movement? Here they are. The first thing, do they know in whom they have believed? Very simple. Do they know in whom they have believed? But this is obviously deeper than it sounds. Like, it's not just, are they a Christian? John Wesley has these 22 questions, which we'll talk about in another video. And in these 22 questions, his followers would ask these questions as a way of self-examination on mostly a daily basis. And there are things like, am I a slave to dress, friends, or habits? There were things like, am I hypocritical? All these different habits of either thinking or habits of what we do. Until you get to question number 22. Question number 22 was, is Christ real to me? And question number 22 completely changed, I think, for John Wesley when he had his heart strangely warmed moment in a Moravian church. He's sitting in a Moravian church. He's been following the Lord for most of his life, and he's traveled all around the world. He had just gotten back from America trying to start a church or take over a church in America. It was in Georgia, I believe. And he goes to this Moravian church. He's been following Jesus. He's very disciplined. He's very rigid. He's doing his thing. But then he has this moment where in his journal he wrote he wrote it in very old English, but something along the lines of, I thought it was that I didn't have enough faith, but I realized that night that it was that I had no faith at all. And I realized in that moment, it was Christ and Christ alone that was sufficient for my salvation. He had this moment of complete, it was an understanding of his own poverty in light of the grace, the saving grace of Jesus Christ. And so for him, moving forward, he had this anointing on his life to be able to identify that in other people. And I think that's true in the church. I think there are people that are just gifted at identifying leaders. There's ways that they can see that this change and this transformation in people, that the Holy Spirit is in this person, and this person is following God. So that was criteria number 1 for Wesley. Do they know in whom they have believed? Here's number 2. Have they gifts as well as grace for the work? Is it obvious that they're good at this thing? If this guy is a business owner and he has been trying to start businesses for the last 30 years and no business has worked, he does not have grace for that specific thing. Right? He might be a hard worker, but he doesn't have a grace for that thing. A grace for that thing means there's just like the wind of God behind them. And when they go to do that thing, it just seems to work. So is there grace for what this person is doing? In the Cornish mining industry, there were these leaders in the mines that Wesley would choose to lead because they were successful at leading. And there was grace for their work of leadership and the people and the way they responded and the way that people followed them. So is there grace and gifts for the work? That was number 2. Here's number 3. Have they success? It's pretty simple. What he meant by have they success is, are there people coming to Jesus from the work that they are doing? Is their life transformation? Is that same Holy Spirit that's in them being transferred into other people from the work they're doing? It's very simple. Do they know in whom they've believed? Have they gifts as well as grace for the work? And have they success? We have so many different ways that we identify, that we raise up, that we choose leaders. Wesley brought it down to these 3 essential things on how to choose leaders for the Methodist movement. So what I want to know from you is, what do you think about this? Like, how does this apply to our context today? Is it negligent? Does it sound genius? Does it cut through? Does it get to the essentials? Is it just crazy to think like that? Was he uneducated in this area of leadership? I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. In the next video, we're going to talk about some of the structure on how they held these leaders accountable, because they had so many leaders that were really uneducated in a lot of areas. Maybe they were emotionally immature. Like, these weren't perfect people he was choosing. He was making leaders of thousands and thousands of people. So how was he able to hold them accountable? That's what we're going to talk about in the next video.